Hello, folks. Welcome to The Sacred Speaks. My name is John Price. I'm your host. First, I'd like to get to a couple of housekeeping details, and then we'll jump into the introductions and then get to the episode. So first and foremost, check The Sacred Speaks out at thesacredspeaks.com. New things are happening over there. New websites coming in the next few weeks, hopefully, fingers crossed. And that'll be exciting, so go check that out when you can. The second thing is check out the Center for the Healing Arts and Sciences. It's a boutique integrative practice that my wife and I created a while back. It's the Center, forhas.com. Check it out, links below. And then also, as always, the music. Music for the podcast and the series is created by Modern Nations. Check them out at modernnationsmusic.com. And if you hang around to the end of the episode, you will hear a full selection of Clouds, the theme music for the podcast. So now to the episode. First, I want to say we got back from Esalen, and we had such an amazing group there. I want to thank Esalen for having me out, and of course, every one of you who participated. That was a wonderful group and was extremely exciting. I've kept in touch with many of you, so thank you. Thanks for being there, and thanks for creating such a wonderful group and connection and experience. I spoke with Esalen, and I'll be going back. Eventually, it's not planned yet, but it was a wonderful experience. If you've never been to Esalen, I highly recommend it. It's quite expansive. So the second is it involves the connection to this podcast. Today I'm interviewing Dr. Christopher Hobbs. I connect with Christopher through Mark Plotkin, and if you'll look back a few episodes, Mark Plotkin and I sat for an interview, and I want to direct you to him really quickly. So Mark Plotkin, check him out at markplotkin.com, link below, of course. And what a good fella he is. Thanks, Mark, for all your help and support through this process. Now, there's something cool because Chris and Mark will be participating in the Telluride Mushroom Festival, and we're going to talk a lot about mushrooms today. So check that out at, let me see that, TellurideInstitute.org, link below. The festival is August 17th through 21st of this year. And I looked at the website. It looks exciting. If you're anywhere near there or plan on educating yourself on mushrooms, then I assume you'll be there. It looks like a wonderful festival. So Mark Plotkin, we got the Telluride, and I want to introduce you to Dr. Hobbs. So Dr. Hobbs, quickly, first of all, I'm on his site right now, and he's got a ton of books. There is this book that we're going to talk about today, Medicinal Mushrooms, The Essential Guide. This is wonderful, and it's a beautiful book. It's gorgeous. So check that out when you can. Chris, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for writing all these amazing books. I mean, he's got stuff from Grow It, Heal It, Women's Herbs, Natural Therapy for Your Liver, Vitamins for Dummies, Herbal Remedies for Dummies, Stress and Natural Healing, Foundations for Health. These are all herbal explorations of herbs that can naturally heal your body, mind, heart, and spirit. That sounds like a big thing, but it is, because it is. Chris is an herbalist, an author, a botanist, a mycologist, and a research scientist. And for information on Chris, check him out at Christopher Hobbs, ChristopherHobbs.com. And his bio, I'll introduce you to him, and then we'll get started. His bio is Dr. Christopher Hobbs is a fourth-generation internationally renowned herbalist, licensed acupuncturist, author, clinician, botanist, mycologist, and research scientist with over 35 years of experience with herbal medicine. Christopher has a doctorate from UC Berkeley in phylogenetics, evolutionary biology, and phytochemistry. He is also a founding member of the American Herbalist Guild. This site is dedicated to all those who love and are inspired by the natural world, especially the green world and the kingdom fungi. So thank you, Chris. What a pleasure. Check out his website. Tons of stuff to look at, and including books, library, classes, and resources. Tons of resources. So I think that does it for today. I'm other than saying that there's a series coming out soon, and be on the lookout for that. That's been extremely exciting to work on. And a lot of new conversations on the podcast coming up. We're going to be talking about fairy tales, diving deeply into ecstatic experience, certainly in antiquity and the Mediterranean region. There are, let me see, who else have I got coming up? I've got in June, Dennis McKenna and I are going to sit down and chat. And and I'm very excited about this book, Ecstatic Experience in the Ancient World. And I'm talking to one of the editors currently, and we're going to dive into a number of those authors who'd written chapters about the ecstasy in antiquity. So for now, let's leave it there. Thank you for being here. Of course, like, subscribe, share, jump online, comment. For anybody who is commenting, I just understand I have a full clinical practice, and so sometimes it can be difficult to comment quickly, but I promise you I'm working to make sure that I'm more present in that way. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and we'll leave it there. Christopher Hobbs, thank you for being here. I'm very excited to get to talk about this book. We connected a la Mark Plotkin, who's been a journeyman on this project, and has certainly helped me think through a lot of these ideas. And when I was talking to him at some point, he said, "You've got to meet Dr. Christopher Hobbs." And I ordered this book immediately, and then he connected us. And I've been eager because this gets at something really interesting. At first we were talking about how my wife, Leela Scott, and I are working on an integrative center in Houston. She's an acupuncturist and I'm a psychotherapist. And to find out that you've both, been an herbalist and written about mushrooms, which we're going to talk about later, but herbs in general, you've got a deep history of following the herb. And then also visionary mushrooms that we're certainly going to talk about. But you're an acupuncturist, and like you've come at these questions a lot of different ways, and so I'm very honored and eager to explore this with you today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Totally my pleasure, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's dive in, man. Um, I figured we could divide this in a couple of different portions. And as we were referencing earlier, I'd like to talk about medicine and medical systems first, and then go through the funnel and go from medical systems into where East and West operate, what Western medicine and theory and even philosophy have been about, and go down into mushrooms and then land on visionary mushrooms. Is that okay with you?
Sounds good to me.
Good. So let's start with the big question. What got you interested in healing in this way? And maybe give a little bit of your biography, and then we'll dive into this larger question about medical systems and what you've learned about those over your studies.
Well, I guess started with my ancestors. Definitely, my grandmother and great grandmother were herbalists. They were community herbalists. My grandmother was the community herbalist in Pasadena, California, on Colorado Boulevard. She had an herb garden there. They had not solar electric panels, obviously, but solar hot water. And she was the go-to herbalist in the community. And you don't see that much in those days. Especially in the LA basin. And then she'd take the red line, she'd go down to the Los Angeles and study with a Chinese herbalist, probably that did acupuncture as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mother, she was an artist and musician. But on my dad's side, my dad and grandfather were botanists, professors of botany. And so I kind of got into plants and botany through my dad. And after that, I don't know. I've always been restless. So on one side, I started playing music a lot and piano and guitar, and I knew the music literature really well, even at a young age. Uh, so I had to make a choice between being a musician or an herbalist or somebody that did something with plants. So I chose plants because I just figured it was a healthier lifestyle and it fit me better because I'm just kind of antsy and like being in the woods and walking around in the woods a lot and fields and I didn't want to. I thought being a musician is kind of a hard. It's difficult to make a living, maybe being a musician
Mm-hmm.
more than well, of course, being an herbalist wasn't being an herbalist. That wasn't even a job description when I started. No one even knew what an herbalist was really. And so I just, and I've always had an overriding um, interest in what is health and what is disease, and what causes disease and dis-ease, and what brings health. And that's been an overriding question in my whole life. I've delved into that both in studying psychology and using a lot of medicinal mushrooms in the sense of, we used to, when I was living up in Oregon, we lived near some cow fields where there were a lot of psilocybin mushrooms growing. So we got to explore that in the 70s, when people weren't typically taking them. And I think that was a big change for me. At one point I microdosed for 9 months straight, and sometimes macrodose. So there was a lot. I think that was a part of a big shift in my spiritual awakening in my early 30s. I had a huge spiritual awakening and joined a spiritual group with Indian lineage and the polarity therapy, and went through the polarity therapy training program and learned how to do body work and more energy, more looking at more energy in the body and how that affects health. I was fascinated, Randolph Stone, I was fascinated with that and practiced that for quite a few years, and joined the community. And there's a lot of meditation and, a strict diet and so forth. So I just, after my big spiritual awakening, then I just thought, I want to be a healer. This is my life work. And and then you can add the plants to that. And so herbalist, I guess. And I wasn't naturally drawn to more strict and say, what's the right word? Um, Modern medicine that was inside a lot. I just thought, well, medicine should be connected to the earth. It should be something that we can do every day, and not not sequestered in hospitals and clinics and where a certain privileged class can administer medicine and healing. I never really liked that idea too much, and I thought that, and I'm still, that's one of the central themes in my work is, what is medicine? That's the central question that I ask, is what is medicine? And I'm starting to do podcasts and reels with the question or with the statement, create medicine. So I've been interested in broadening out the definition of medicine rather than pills that we might take or going into the clinic and getting a procedure. And I just think that we need, as a culture and a society, to broaden out what is medicine and what is healing. And it's often so in our culture, especially in the United States, it's kind of defined by financial concerns, and dare I even say greed. And of course, Patch Adams was onto that long ago. Medicine should be free, but medicine should be free because we should create medicine. We all should create medicine every day, and that's what's going to sustain and create health in our life. And by that I mean, stop taking time to stop and smell a rose and look at a flower deeply on our walk, or and smell deeply, or have oatmeal frequently in our diet, or because it's so simple and so incredibly healing and helpful, and so many other things. Just meditation, of course, is a huge one for me because it's just an opportunity to sit quietly and I don't, meditation, I think there's so many methods and different books on meditation, but it's so simple. You just sit down in a space and you just, basically look inside and see what's going on in there. And I used to ask my patients in the early days, they'd come in and they'd have this long list of ailments and symptoms, headache and digestive problems and skin rashes, and I'm depressed and I don't have any energy. And I just, I'd say, well, Do you ever take time just to sit down and just take some moments of quiet time and just see, does it feel good in there? What does it feel like inside? And we're so outward all the time that we
Hmm.
don't take the opportunity just to sit and say, "Oh, what's going on in there?
Let
Does
me
it feel
pause you
good?"
real quick. Let me,
Yeah, go ahead.
because I got a question. I gotta go back to two things.
Okay.
Two little threads I want to follow up on. The first is that what I know what sends I at least can imagine what sends people into a field of cow shit in kind of today. I understand the kind of ethos that's the worldview that's around this behavior. You know, we have a lot that's happening about psychedelics and certainly psilocybin. But in the
Right.
70s, what was happening to a 17-year-old guy who wants to go out and look at mushrooms? What were you searching for or imagining you were going to find?
Well, I just love being outdoors in the woods, and I realized that there was healing medicine in being in wild nature, and
Hmm.
especially in old growth forests and and elk pastures where there was elk shit around, and then
It's even
I went
better.
to
Elk shit. It's better than
yeah,
cow shit, man.
that's more a little more wild,
Wild, yeah.
few less chemicals probably.
Yes.
And I think another big defining moment it was, and I'll have to credit Paul Stamets, and that is in 1977. I was I was big into herbs and collecting books already and teaching and leading herb walks, but mushrooms hadn't hit me yet. So
Hmm.
a friend of mine, a naturopathic doctor, said, "Oh, well, there's a mushroom conference happening up on Orcas Island. Do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure, why not?" Because I saw mushrooms out in the woods when I was looking for plants and herbs. So I went up there, and sure enough, it was one of Paul Stamets' first um, work conferences that he coordinated and pulled people together. And Dr. Smith was there, one of the leading mycologists of the time, that wrote a lot of field guides, about the only field guides available. Gaston Guzman, who was the world's leading
Hmm.
expert in psilocybin mushrooms, and a number of other mushroom people. And once I got there, it was outside, conference in Orcas Island, beautiful place. And then I started going on some mushroom walks, and that was it. I was done. I was finished. I was like, mushrooms, yes. And 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 these are my people too. I just realized that the herbalists have always been my people, and it's always been about community. It's always been about community. All the herbalists are such great characters and rebels and
Yeah.
so fascinating and intellectual and health conscious. And that became my tribe and my family. And that's what's really been the most important aspect of herbalism, I think, even today. And the circle keeps widening. And the same with mushrooms. Mushroom people are really special people, quirky and intellectually curious and also want to connect with the earth and its incredible offerings. And so I just realized these are my people too, the mushroom people, and
Hmm.
so I just went for it full on and have been till this day. Um, but I think that was it. And I was up in Oregon and psilocybin mushrooms. A friend of mine showed me and said, well, these will change your consciousness. But by then I had already taken LSD and peyote. So I was an early experimenter. My dad was a professor, and we smoked pot together way back when. My brother and I and my dad smoked pot for the first time, way back when I was very young, and well, old enough, but but fairly young, and so I was of that ilk in that time, and just that time and that place, and then I heard the Beatles, John Lennon's "Strawberry Fields
Hmm.
Forever" and Country Joe whispering LSD in the background in one of his songs. And I lived in LA and I grew up in Pomona, and I just thought, I'm going up to San Francisco. This is where I want to go. And so I just went up there and was part of the whole scene, Grateful Dead and everything. So I guess
What year?
that's where it
What
started.
year did you go up there?
Uh, 69.
Well, yeah. And then you ended up getting a degree at Berkeley.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I've been a lifelong learner. I've been in more colleges than you can imagine. I mean, wherever I moved, was very antsy when younger, but wherever I moved, the first thing I did is enroll in a college and start taking classes, whether it was psychology or I was an art history major. I was a literature major, psychology major, whatever. So I've just been a lifelong learner. But eventually, once I got my acupuncture license and became a practitioner, I just thought, I want to go deeper. I want more chemistry. I want pharmacology. I want biology. I want to know how the cell works. And so then I did 10 pretty stringent years of science training and ending up at Berkeley with a PhD in integrative biology, which
Hmm.
really integrates genetics, ecology, conservation, botany, evolutionary biology, and a lot of chemistry. And I worked in a chemistry lab analyzing plant chemicals and relating that to genetics and lineage.
What was your
So
dissertation on?
my dissertation, well, it was a three-part one, but basically the genus Artemisia, which is one of the most important medicinal genera of all. So I looked deeply into Artemisia, and I sequenced a lot of gene sequences and compared those together and built a big lineage, a big phylogeny, showing how they were related to each other. And there are many, many different species of Artemisia, over 500, 600, depending on the system you're using. And then I analyzed all the essential oils of all those plants too, which was really fun because Artemisia, like mugwort and wormwood, some of those other well-known Artemisias, they all have scent. So that's what drew me to them. They all have scent. So I delved deeply into the volatile components of Artemisia and compared that to the genetics to see whether the chemicals seemed to be more environmentally informed or whether it was genetically determined. And so I worked on that, and then I did some ethnobotany of Artemisia as well. So that was, but it's pretty broad.
Yeah.
It's pretty broad. At Cal, it's like your imagination is the guide, not the curriculum as much. That's why I started out at UC Davis and I just found it too I don't know what you would want to call it, but rather regimented. Okay, you got to stick to this program. Your major professor determines your course of study and so forth. And at Cal, it's like it's just opens it up to wherever your imagination can go, and that's what I really enjoyed. Though you do have to take the core courses, of course, but evolutionary biology and so forth. But it was just after all that science training, people ask me, well, what did you get out of it, or what did you learn after 10 years straight of hard science training? And I just said, I know nothing. That's what I learned. I don't know anything. I mean, it's so miraculous. It's so amazing how interconnected everything is. And also, so that was one of the biggest things is just that it's so interconnected. It's such a web that it's isolating one plant or one system is very limiting. So the more you open up your
Yeah.
mind and you don't have notions, you don't say this is how it is, this is how it works. No, you've never. People say, well, what's your opinion on this? And well, right now, this is my hypothesis right now, but it could change tomorrow.
Well,
There's
this is important to say that the more you expose yourself to different areas of knowledge or different disciplines, the more humble you become because you realize that there are
right.
many different, and that therein gets a problem with fundamentalism, for example, when you say, well, this is the world and this is how it exists, and then I assert this ideology as absolute fact everywhere I go. And I do think that humility is a good byproduct of subjecting yourself consistently to learning curves, which inherently make you feel very small.
That's right. You stand in awe
Yeah.
of this incredible universe, and even a local biological system, like walking through the forest. You're in awe because the more that you know, the more that you know that how complex it is, how beautiful it is, how intelligent it is.
I talked to a guy once who's a biologist, and he studied flea reproductive systems, and he also studied Corbin, the idol and the icon. He was interested in French religion,
Right.
mysticism, and Persian mysticism, and he was more religious than many people I've ever known. He could totally. You said earlier, awe, and I think that if we are going to study religion, we have to include the idea of awe within it and ask ourselves when and where we do experience awe. And
Right.
the academy, or seeking knowledge, the quest, is of course one of those mythic landscapes wherein we will be challenged and stretched and encounter new experiences and new modes of existence, and then we behave as humans behave, and that expands us and broadens us and contextualizes who we are and envision ourselves to be within a much more expansive cosmos. And so I'm with you. I wonder sometimes when people forget how religious science is. It it essentially brings on religious language, and I think we forget that a lot because we think that science eradicates religion, and I think in so many ways it creates the attitude that religions have been in relationship with since the dawn of religion.
Well, you can certainly get to a mystical state
Yeah.
by delving deeply into the natural world and looking at it so closely and its interactions and complexity. You definitely, because it's it's ego dissolution
Yeah.
in a way when you really go deeply into it.
What sent you into the forest? It seems that was a pretty holy place for you since you were very, very young.
Yeah, that's a sacred place for sure. And for me, I don't know. It's just, it's as simple as, well, of course, my dad started out showing me trees and botany, but I was interested in it right from the beginning. And we'd be driving around, and I'd say, what's the name of that tree? What's the name of that tree? And he knew them all. So he could tell me, well, that's a spruce, that's a deodar cedar or whatever. But I was always interested in trees. And I think it's just really, I have to go back to, it's just a spiritual, energetic um, feeling that I get when I am in the forest. It's a calmness, it's a peacefulness, it's a expansion. Of course, if you want to get mechanistic about it, the trees, the conifers especially, are emitting tons and tons of chemicals out into the air,
Huh.
terpenes, volatile terpenes. So they're exuding all of these compounds, and I was probably breathing them in. I've always been very smell oriented. From the very young age, I'd smell every flower, I'd crush every plant and smell it, and find out which ones were aromatic and so forth. That's been a characteristic my entire life, and I still do that constantly. If I walk down the street, I'm smelling everything. So I think it's just a sensual feast being in the forest, but the stillness and the spiritual aspect of the forest as a healer. And now you read about forest therapy, of
Yes,
course,
but they
but it's
call it like
true.
forest walking. That we have to prescribe this stuff to people because of our world.
Well, yeah. Can you imagine how many millions of people live in New York City and never
Right.
go to a forest?
It is
That's
a
one
magical.
one issue we're having as humans is disconnected from the natural world.
How do you make sense of, if we could borrow from your scientific biology, worldview for a second? How do you understand language like spiritual and energetic related? I mean, you said it a second ago where you said if you want to be mechanistic, speak to that for a second. Your biological upbringing, acupuncture, different interpretive frameworks. How does that make sense to you? spirituality and
Well,
science?
I feel I was fortunate because my mom was not a scientist by any means. She was an artist, a humorist, an artist, and a musician, trained as a concert pianist by her mother, who was a concert pianist. So I had that side strongly, a love of music and art. And then on the other side, my dad and his dad were scientists. So I think that's why both sides, I feel like both sides of myself are developed to a certain degree so that I appreciate both sides. And even though I went through that 10 years of science training, I still consider, I'm in touch with the energetic and the spiritual side of plant healing. I don't I don't just look at the chemicals, though I love looking at the chemicals and saying, berberine is an amazing compound that plants produce, but I look at the chemical constituents in a way as energetic principles, as that do have some measure of energetics, or energetic healing, if you want to say that, and like berberine has an energetic healing for inflammation and infection, and and so I just think both sides are there definitely, and they and there is a very strong energetic component to healing. I think everyone understands that at some level, um, that it's not just the pills and the chemicals that are doing the healing. And even in the strict medical sense, in a clinic, in a sterile medical clinic, there still are cues in there that are going on. Um, the tone of voice of the doctor, maybe, or just any caring touch or
Hmm.
expression, something like that, has powerful healing properties. Uh, and the fact that he or she has a white coat on and a stethoscope or whatever, and a certain position, and a tremendous amount of training, we put trust in them. But that energetic part of healing has to be there. And but when it gets too mechanistic and too profit oriented, then people start moving towards herbalists and acupuncturists, because that's over on the other side. They tend to be more energetic and more less evidence based in a way, and modern medicine is on the other side. So many people, I think, mix and match now, herbalists and medical professionals, which
Hmm.
is the right thing to do, I think.
In psychotherapy, we talk about it. I remember when I was learning all the different theoretical orientations, what they all come down. What they do is like in general psychology 101, they say, look, this is what cognitive behavioral therapy is. This is Freudian psychoanalysis. This is Bowenian. This is self-object theory, so on and so forth. It's almost like a religious sect, and then they say, well, you can choose any one of these orientations, but really, what the agent of change is the relationship. It's the quality of relationship that can be connected with in a sacred container where you're exposing yourself to somebody, you're allowing the relationship to develop and cultivate, and we heal wounds from relationship in a relationship. That's my orientation. That's how I come at healing. Help me understand, how do you approach healing when you think about herbs, and even from your acupuncture training, what are you doing or trying to do when you're healing?
Well, you're right on one side. Certainly, I embrace what you're saying, in that the relationship is so important. Kindness, loving kindness, and the ability to listen actively and genuinely care about the other person without being attached, and also having worked out a lot of your own stuff, so that
Mm.
you don't get things coming from them. You don't hook into
Yeah.
that kind of stuff and react to it. So you're an open vessel. It can go right through, but there is a sense of deep caring and deep listening, and loving kindness. That's, to me, the most powerful. part of the healing, but also the chemicals and metabolism of the body. There is that to consider. For instance, diet is, I mean, herbalism is so amazing because it really combines the spiritual aspects of getting connected more to nature and to the earth on one hand, and on the other hand, there have been so much research on herbal medicine now and herbs that show us how they work biochemically, how they work on a cellular level, and it just continues around the world to be an amazing blossoming of research and clinical trials on natural medicines, including mushrooms and herbs. So it's both. But for me, diet is so important, and health habits are so important. And diet, because we're eating throughout the day. We're putting things in our mouth. So more than herbal medicine, diet is a stronger medicine than herbal medicine, simply because we're imbibing so much more of it, and we're more focused on it, and we're more regular with it. So to me, diet is herbal medicine, and I call it herb food medicine, and and so and mushrooms. And so we have to look very carefully at what we're eating, and that's a central theme of my healing work, is food herbs or herb foods or whatever you want to call it. But certainly, and there are a lot of spices, of course, in cooking, and there's garlic and there's onions and they all have energetic principles. And in Chinese medicine, I've got 2 or 3 books that just basically talks about the energetics of food and the therapeutic uses of food. So like radishes or mustard greens has a certain effect on the body and on the internal organs, and fruit and meat, and has an energetic. It's either hot or cold or neutral or whatever, and it has a taste, obviously bitter and sweet and sour and acrid, and just like herbs do. So there's really not a lot of difference between food and herbs, and I include foods in herbal medicine. Now, when you get into packaged foods and heavily processed foods, that's a different story. Then we have to talk about corporate food products that are so highly processed, and why we're eating those. Why we put up with it? Why do we put up with it? Why do we go into the store? And I posted this on Facebook not long ago. There's a 50-foot aisle with drinks,
Yeah.
sodas, flavored waters on one side, and cases of them, and cases of cans and plastic all the way down for 50 feet. I took a picture of that and I posted it, and I said I was really thirsty. I went into the store and I looked at that aisle of drinks and walked down, and I was looking at all of them, and I just said, I went home and I got a glass of filtered water out of my tap, and I took a lemon off of my tree and I squeezed it into the water and I drank it. And so
Well, that's
why do we put up with it? That's
well,
what
because I mean, it's comfort and convenience. I think, like we this is a massive shadow function. You've actually articulated it really well, that because we don't do that on our own, we rely, somebody else has to do it for us. This happens energetically speaking in family systems. Like what I don't tend to, those around me are going to have to deal with. And so it's a function of distribution. And, it goes downstream, so to speak, or I guess upstream in this case. But I think we make a sacrifice. I was just talking to somebody about this, the kind of Faustian bargain that we tend to have when we
for
trade.
convenience.
Yes.
But then what? But it's so convenient just to fill up a flask full of water at home and add the flavoring. I mean,
Right.
what I do is I have a bottle of Newton's, because I love Concord grape juice. I have a bottle of organic, just Concord grape juice from Newton, and I pour just a little bit of that in there. I pour maybe a few tablespoons in a quart glass jar and fill it up with filtered water and shake it, and I love that stuff. And I just drink that, or I put a lemon in. I've got a lemon tree. I put the lemon in there and squeeze it in, and then I take a half teaspoon of I don't know, maybe raw organic sugar and just put a little bit of sweetness in there and shake it up, or honey, and I
Hmm.
drink that all day long. And what's not convenient about that? And
I don't know. The one pushback I want to give on that is that most people haven't, I mean, not that you need extensive knowledge like you have, but I think most people feel really intimidated um, by having to do it on their own. I mean, even cooking, you can ask the question of why we don't cook. Again, it's a function of, I think, convenience. In uh, Netflix had a great Michael Pollan series out called Cooked, and that was one of the questions he asked, where he said, "Ever since the dawn of time, people have asked who's going to do the cooking, and we're constantly passing the buck." You know,
some people like to cook, though. Some people really enjoy
totally,
cooking.
totally. Well, so let's kind of dial in here, because I think, what is your critique of, you said it earlier, I think, modern medicine? What's the issue with how we're treating disease and sickness?
Well, the two main overarching themes in our culture is applies to medicine, and that is hegemony and greed.
Here we go.
Those are
Yeah.
the two overreaching things. And the fact that I'm just going to be frank, that basically politicians, and I got this from Russell Brand, I'll admit it, but because I watch him and listen to some of his podcasts, but
My
he
wife
basically,
does too. She's a devotee. Yeah.
yeah, and so he brought up, and he just nailed it. He said politicians are there. They're basically employees of the corporations, and they're
Yeah.
there to make us feel like we have a choice, that we can vote. But at the end of the day, they're all basically employees of the giant corporations. They're all on the take, and you can't get elected unless you get money from corporations. You can't get elected unless
Hmm.
you're very, very, very wealthy, like Bloomberg. And in that case, then how did you get that wealthy in the first place? So,
Right.
and then hegemony, is there, and especially in medicine. I mean, as an herbalist in the 80s, trying to practice herbal medicine. I mean, I knew people that were thrown into jail for simply offering herbs to somebody you know for supporting their cancer process, and they were thrown. I know a doctor, an MD, who was thrown into jail for offering astragalus to one of his patients, his cancer patients. So
He was put
you
in
know,
jail.
yeah, he
Wow.
spent like 4 or 5 days in jail. Yeah. And in the early 80s, it was, they were really, it was very difficult to openly practice herbal medicine without and that you couldn't use the language that we use today. We had to be very careful. Have you ever heard of Dr. Christopher?
No.
Yeah, he was a very well-known herbalist from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s. He was a teacher of a number of the herbalists in my generation. He was practicing herbalism, classic herbal medicine from Europe and other disciplines, but he was thrown into jail numerous times. He was arrested numerous times, prosecuted for simply seeing patients and giving them herbal formulas. It's hard to believe now, but that was in the 1970s. So, so it's hegemony and greed drives a lot of, well, food. Why do we have all this corporate food and out there on the shelf that isn't healthy? It isn't helpful. It's not connected to nature in any way, shape, or form. And I just read an article in the New York Times this morning that was talking about regenerative farming. Have you been tuning
Yes.
into that?
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine? Well, and then I read another article a couple of weeks ago that showed very clearly that the microorganisms in soil hold more carbon than any other um, way of sequestration
Mm.
on the planet. So the microbes in the soil are so important for sequestering carbon dioxide. And when you rip up, can you imagine the big giant corporate farms in Iowa or wherever, where they just plow up hundreds of acres and rip the soil open and then spray it with chemicals? I mean, that is really devastating to our planet's ability to regulate the amount of carbon dioxide. That's incredible when you think about it. Corporate, so corporate farming, corporate food, corporate medicine goes hand in hand, because when we're eating corporate food every day, and we're disconnecting from the natural, our mother basically,
Yeah.
then we're going to have illness. And as soon as we have illness, then corporate medicine comes in to try to suppress the symptoms, but not get at the root of the problems. So medicine should be started really on the farm. And, so these are concepts that are just so clear and evident once you start really looking deeply into the way things work, and start listening to people like Russell Brand, of course, or Gabor Mate.
Yeah.
Gabor Mate. I'm cry when I see some of his videos. I've read all of his books. I'm just in love with the guy, and I want to hug him. I just think he's telling the truth. I love
Well,
people that tell the truth.
so if you had it your way, how would we structure our healing system?
Well, you know, first of all, I don't know. I think we have to tax food. We have to tax food that's causing illness, and it's clear. There. Have you ever read? It's called the China Study. Did you ever read the China
I've heard
Study?
of it, but I haven't read it.
One of the most amazing health books you ever want to read on diet. And he points out very, very clearly, and of course this is a trend now, but he points out very, very clearly that a whole foods plant-based diet is going to lead to half the amount of chronic illness. That alone, and even less. And not only that, but there are decades of good research studies that back it up. I was surprised at the amount of good science behind the fact that if you have a heavily animal-based diet, that chronic disease is much more likely to occur throughout one's lifetime. I was pretty blown away. There is a newer edition out, and I would recommend that to anybody. That book, if you want to find out about what we're eating, and again, that's herbal medicine, and we're not doing ourselves any favors. Um, we might get convenience, but then what are we doing with the time that we save through the convenience? What are we doing? We're binge watching Netflix,
Yeah,
and
what I heard, I think I can't remember where I read this, but it was some Amazonian tribe that called Westerners, people of the pill.
yeah, yeah,
How
that's
often
right.
we turn to these. We don't make lifestyle choices. We make choices that help conveniently address our perceived problems, rather than let the perceived problems take us into a different way of living.
Well, it's like looking out there again to the pill or to the doctor or to the authority rather than looking in. I think that's the fundamental case right there. That's the fundamental case to be made. If you asked me, well, what are the two things that we can do that could really transform our life and make such a huge difference? Or three things. I'd say number one, uh, definitely meditate. Definitely take, or you don't even have to call it meditation. Just take some time every day to sit quietly and just look inside. I think I know from my own experience that early childhood experiences will come up. You'll have a feeling of dread, or you'll have a feeling of dis-ease or discomfort, and then you just sit with that. Okay, what's that? Where is that discomfort coming from? What's going on? And it'll just come. It'll just come in. If you're open and you're quiet and you're present, then it'll come in. Your early childhood things will come in. And you can just ask, well, where does that discomfort come from? And then just be open for what comes. So that's number one. Number two, increase your fiber, because fiber is a marker for vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, flavonoids, antioxidants. it's a marker for all of the other stuff. It means that the less processed your food is, the more fiber you're going to get. The average American gets 15 grams of fiber a day. The government recommends 25, and a person with a traditional diet gets 40 or 50 grams, up to 60 grams of fiber per day. So, and now there's this new wave of interest in the microbiome and
Yes.
how the complexity of our microbiome is so important for health. And they're uncovering more and more interesting connections with the microbiome. And the number one thing with the microbiome is complexity, diversity. So the more we dumb down our microbiome by eating, by of course antibiotics and chemicals that we might use in our diet, but keep not diversifying our diet and not having a lot of fiber. Fiber and prebiotics are what really lead to diversity. And mushrooms, by the way, have the highest fiber food out there. Mushrooms are the highest fiber food. Next is beans, the whole range of lentils and beans and legumes. That's the second highest in fiber. So we want, in almost every traditional culture, eats a lot of mushrooms, especially in Asia, of course, daily lion's mane, daily shiitake. It's an integral part of the diet. And then, of course, a lot of vegetables. And also legumes. Legumes are a daily part of the diet in so many millions of people in India, China, Asia, and so forth. Legumes are an integral part of their diet. And so fiber's number two. And number three is just, of course, move your body and stretch your body, because as we get older, if we're sitting, what happens is that the muscles contract. So when we sit and we're inactive, the muscles start contracting, and when they contract, they will produce toxins. Because they're under stress. The muscles are under stress when they're contracted, and when we're sitting, they're going to contract. And so we need to stretch them. You notice a cat, when they get up in the morning, they're stretching out and yawning and stretching. And so that's the third thing, is just stretch frequently throughout the day. If you're waiting for your toaster oven to ding off, do a yoga pose, or touch the floor and hold it, or do 10 squats, or throughout the day, incorporate it in your life, where you're constantly like stretching and feeling what's going, just like going inside and looking, being aware of what's going on in your psychology and your mental processes. Be aware of what your body feels like too, and stretch. And that includes walking. Walking is incredible. So those are the three things that you can do to transform your life right now.
Take a drink. You get meditation, fiber, and stretching. On this note, what's your critique? What are we to learn from our response to COVID, and what do we get wrong, and what did you think about the vaccine rollout, so on and so forth?
Yeah, that's a topic of our time, isn't it?
Oh man, yeah.
Well, first of all, I think, and I did a posting on this on my. It was on. I guess I put it on Instagram and my Facebook public figure page, Dr. Christopher Hobbs. But my question was, are viruses alive? So many of us are afraid of viruses or concerned about viruses, but we don't. Are we looking at what's the nature of viruses? What are they here for? What are they doing? Are they just these agents out there that are attacking us and harming us? Is that all they're here for? And so if you really start delving into the literature about viruses, of course it's voluminous, but I think the bottom line with viruses is why they're here is what their place in the web of life is balance. They're here to create balance. And did you know that there are probably 3 trillion viruses in our body?
I read that somewhere.
3 trillion viruses in our body. Yeah. Every one of our bacterial cells that's in our gut and throughout our body, in our skin, everywhere, is infected with, if you want to put it that way, or at least have viruses inside of them, regulating the bacteria and promoting bacteria that produce health and homeostasis, and also suppress other bacteria that could be harmful. So a lot of the viruses in our body have a regulatory function, an ancient regulatory function, and they're found at every level of biology, of every level in our web of life. You'll find viruses in the ocean, in ocean creatures, under the ice, in the atmosphere, in bacteria. Of course, they're called phages, and they have a great regulatory uh, importance in our body. So, and that's a very ancient regulatory process. And think about it: we create the viruses. That's what's so fascinating about it is, if you think about it, our cells are producing the viruses, right? So you could think of it as where are the viruses coming from? We're creating the viruses. That's the big shock. And they're not only that, but they're swapping DNA with us like crazy. They're swapping little pieces of DNA with us all the time. And so they're basically, that's another way that they regulate. And they're a very important source of nucleic acid for basically building up DNA and in our body, which is in every single cell of our body that has such an important function. So when you look at it in those terms, then we can begin to understand their place and their importance, and not fear them so much. On the other hand, then you start asking the question, well, what about Ebola? What about polio? What about some of these viruses that? And then in my talk lecture, I looked in the history of plagues,
Mm-hmm.
and wow, some of these plagues, wow, I mean, they killed half of the population of Europe. Millions and millions and millions of people died with with viral infections and bacterial infections. But why? Why? Why are all these millions of people dying? And if we ask ourselves that, then we could look at it, we could have the hypothesis that at that point in our evolution, we needed a big pruning at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bigger picture here. Is all I'm saying. I don't have all the answers, but
Right.
But why these giant plagues swept through so many millions of people? But I do have a very strong sense that there is an importance, that there is a reason why. Just like wars, just like chaos, there has to be chaos in certain periods of time. Things become stagnant and you might say in cultural evolution uh, periods, there becomes stagnation, just like in Rome, you might say. And then the hordes come in and they completely destroy the Roman Empire or fragment it. Why? Because it's reinvigorating. It's reinvigorating the species and our and the way that we're learning, the way that we're growing and expanding as beings.
Well, this idea was in, um, at the root, I think, of the flood narrative in creation myths. We
Right.
see that dynamic where the population is overwhelmed by a natural act that forever transforms the ways in which we live. And these happen to family systems, they happen to individuals in the form of traumas, they happen collectively in the form of natural events, of course. But I from a philosophical lens, we say, yeah, there's purpose in a virus that's understandable as we broaden our perspective and we see things in the same way that I'm consistently having cells dying,
Right.
even in this moment in my body, and I would never even notice it. The idea that we might call this other God, that sometimes God just has nothing to do with what happens on the social level, in that fractal that happens in me all the time. But the question then on a medical from a medical perspective, how did we do? because it seems like we created a massive shit show.
Well, as we can see, I mean, I think many people probably before the pandemic came, I mean, you could look around and say, we're not living in balance. I mean, you go
Uh-huh.
into a giant football field store full of all these processed plastic products, and we know that the plastic is building up in the ocean, and now for the first time they've shown plastic microparticles in the bloodstream of humans, and on and on. You know what we're doing here, and for me, I go down to the Bay Area and I see as far as I can see, there are cars and concrete
Mm-hmm.
and buildings, and you just have to think we're not in balance here. This is not something's going to happen. And sure enough, the pandemic came. Well, on one level, with the pandemic, there's this natural selection.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It worked. One of the first things it did is run through a lot of nursing homes where there were 80-year-olds, 90-year-olds, many of which whom were not healthy at all. They don't have a healthy lifestyle. They aren't encouraged to have a healthy lifestyle, even in nursing homes and where there's medical care. It has nothing to do with health. It's just babysitting them until they die, basically. And I hate to be so blunt, but so the virus really did, kill a lot of elderly people that were in nursing homes, and so there's natural selection at work here,
And
evolution of
anybody, I just want to check something real quick, because anybody that has a problem with this framework, I invite you to ask yourself what you think nursing homes are. And, I think I do really get your point, because what we're saying is that, look, nature has an intelligence that's beyond our comprehension,
That's
and
right.
we've recognized this from time immemorial, because there's one fundamental difference between we and the gods, and that is that the gods are eternal. Therefore, they are forces that will be here well after and well before our individual lives. So human beings have been interacting with these forces for millennia, and we've been conceptualizing and narrativizing and understanding what these forces are and trying to contend with them.
Right.
And yeah, like, we don't like it. And yes, tornadoes are going to come, and forest fires are going to come, and uh, plagues are going to come. And it seems to me that we need to figure out how we listen to the wisdom. And I think that's what people aren't wanting to look at, which is,
Right.
it's a little moralistic, but what is this a commentary upon? And it sounds like you're landing in the camp of, it's a commentary of the fact that we are greedy, convenience seeking en masse, and that kind of
And we're
industrialized.
self-serving.
Yeah,
We're
totally. Yes.
focused on the self. I mean, come on, people. You can't wear a mask in a store to protect other people because it's a little uncomfortable putting a mask on. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, many people say, well, it's because I don't want to be told what to do. And that's that thinking of me. I'm the most important. I'm more important than anything else. Instead of, we're all in this together. It's all, how we all do is important. And when you think about individual health and how we feel psychologically depressed or anxious or whatever, look around us. I mean, it's really, it's not the health of the individual, that it's really the health of the family. And Gabor Mate brings this up many times, that it's, if you look at an individual who has depression and anxiety and MS and so forth, what is you have to look at the health of the family and the dynamic in
Mm-hmm.
the family, and also in the community, in the wider community, and in the wider country. And so I think our thinking, so that's my point now, to get back to the pandemic, is let's focus on the good that came out of the pandemic and that is still coming out of the pandemic. There's so much good that came out. Yes, there's suffering. It creates suffering, but there's immeasurable suffering just in daily living of most of us, just because uh, ennui, even ennui or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, because we're
Mm-hmm.
bored or because we're really depressed about what's going on in the world and wars everything else, and it seems hopeless, and so there's all that going on. But there's so much good that has come out of this pandemic. For instance, just the fact that we're not going to go out and get on a plane or drive 20 miles to get a Haagen-Dazs or whatever, at night because there's a store open that's got Haagen-Dazs. We've got to start thinking about what personal responsibility here to the planet, to the other people, to the community. I'm not trying to moralize. It's just a basic fact that we can look around and easily see how out of balance the world is.
Well, you've been listening to the wisdom of the forest and the trees for a long time, and so that's going to be understandable that that's your worldview. And it's a little bit what native traditions really, I think, are trying to communicate on a lot of levels is like we're the guardians of the things that aren't seen or recognized by collectivity currently. And because of industry, because of overpopulation, because of technology, because of the ways in which we connect, and we're leaving a lot out. We are disconnected from a soulful way of being in the earth. And so, and I think where you're going is that a lot of modern medicine, and this may be too cynical, but modern medicine is a way of treating the consequences of that split. So it benefits from the split that it creates. Is that fair to say?
Exactly right. It's a whole circle of my friend always says, well, we should have free in health insurance because it's the government that allows, all of these processed foods. It allows companies to put out all of this toxic air and allows, and suppresses and holds back electric vehicles, for instance, for green energy, and allows, all these internal combustion engines out there, millions and millions of them, to spew out the contents into the air. They're the ones that are not passing regulations or laws in our favor. It's in favor of the corporations oftentimes. So they should give us free health insurance. So it's all definitely connected very closely. The food that is being promoted out there everywhere we go is like you can't go anywhere on the internet or on TV. I don't watch TV, but the internet, and I used to watch TV now and then, but where they, say at night around dinner time, they show somebody with a dish of something, maybe some meat dish or something, and then pouring this thick cheese on it, and they zoom in on it, and you can see the cheese, the thick cheese like spreading out over it, and it's supposed to be appetizing, but it's just, it gives me the shivers when I look at it. I can't even watch it. But
well, it's sensory pleasure. It's hedonism, and we have a culture of hedonism that even, I mean, to go into visionary mushrooms, because I want to point us in that direction. There's something about what Maria Sabina said with. She said something about, to Gordon Wasson, something about like, you can look at the pretty pictures, but that's not really the healing. And so there is something about, in our human experience, if we get lost in sensory, pleasureful experiences, we can miss the descent into a deeper reality and essence of our own existence. And
well, sure,
that's our
it's
culture.
The shadow. It's the shadow that really is the powerful mover and shaker. It's the shadow, and we want to embrace that. That's the point.
Yes.
That's Pema Chodron's.
Yes.
Main point. That's her main point. Embrace it. Don't run away from the pain and the fear. Embrace it. Go into it.
I recommend her work to people all the time. My own personal experience, when my life fell apart, I read When Things Fall Apart, and it was glorious. So if anybody hasn't read that, get that.
Powerful. I was fortunate.
So the only other thing on this topic, which I think I'm certainly wondering, is your critique of, like, so there's a big conflict, and I'm assuming you've read a lot of these papers, so I'd like to get your opinion on it. The vaccine and its efficacy.
I knew you were going to say that.
Right. Because, look, I'm a psychologist, and there are times when I look at statistics and articles and go, I don't fucking, like. So to connect with people who have the mind that have been reading those articles. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, yeah, the vaccine. I mean, on one hand, I mean, for me, I'm a scientist again, so I'm in the middle. I don't take one side or the other. I'm in the middle.
Good.
I see both sides. I see
Hmm.
both sides of the picture. And on one side, and even herbalists, even some herbalists say are really they don't call themselves anti-vaxxers, but they're not going to get a vaccine because they say we should be able to use herbs and natural medicine, and we should take care of our health, take care of our immune system, boost our immune system with reishi and astragalus, and really get plenty of sleep so our immune system and manage the stress. Our immune system is strong. We have all of these beautiful herbs that we can use if we
Yes.
happen to get infected. And I totally agree with them. I'm 100% onto that. On the other hand, the reality is that most people are not there. Most people
Mm.
are not there. They're busy trying to make a living, trying to manage their families and their everything that's going on in their life and in our busy, stressful life, and they don't have time to study that and to practice that. So they're under stress. They've got 2 or 3 kids maybe, and
Hmm.
school, and they have problems in school because they can't go to school and they're at home, and there are all these family dynamics creating stress. So I understand that side of it too. But as far as actually getting the vaccine and looking at what a vaccine is, I mean, it's a way of activating our immune response against a certain pathogen, a
Hmm.
specific pathogen. And of course, they've been around for quite a while. It was when you look at smallpox, smallpox was basically uh, the only the only thing that saved us. I mean, smallpox was like millions of people died every 10 years. We'd have a resurgence of smallpox, and they've identified smallpox back in Egyptian times, believe it or not.
Wow.
They found a mummy with smallpox lesions on their
Hmm.
face, pock marks. So smallpox had been around for a long time, and every so often it killed millions and millions of people, and it was still around in the 20th century. And it was only only the cowpox vaccine, finding out that cowpox was a similar virus, that if you took cowpox, a cow that was infected with the virus cowpox, and inoculated people with it, that they would have some immunity to smallpox. And then they finally did develop a stronger smallpox vaccine. That's what got rid of it, and they almost eliminated it on planet Earth. It's only and it's just highly we're highly free now of smallpox,
Right.
and it killed millions of people every 5 to 10 years. So vaccines aren't inherently evil, and what about mandating it? And this is a new technology. Yes, it is a new technology, but it's been around for 10, 15, 20 years that they've been working on it. So I think, and it does spike immunity, and the research clearly shows that if you have a vaccine, you have 2 vaccines and a booster, plus you get infected, say with Omicron, that you will have the strongest possible um, antibody protection against COVID. However, having said that, we also, if you've been infected, you'll also have a very good, probably based on the research I've done, you'll have somewhat stronger um, protection against COVID if you have an infection than you can get from a vaccine. You can read papers on both sides, but overall, I think that it's really true, and it makes sense because we're exposed to the whole virus, not
Hmm.
just the spike protein, certain spike protein. So so it's so I just think that yeah, it's a personal choice, I guess, but and if you're and it just gets so mixed up into politics and
Hmm.
everything else, as we know. So putting that aside, overall, my bottom line is I'm for the vaccine because I feel like it does offer protection for other people. and family members and so forth. And then if you happen to get infected, of course, try to keep a strong immune system. There are many ways to do that, and really manage your stress and so forth, and eat a good, healthy diet, which is positive for our immune response. And so I think it's really important to take personal responsibility for our health,
Hmm.
and that protects other people. So that's really important as far as I'm concerned.
Not that
And
we need to. This isn't. This is kind of an uncharted conversation, but I realize I'm hearing about it so much in my private practice, but also amongst people I'm talking to. So I figure that we're here talking, so I may as well ask you. And you just taught a class on it, so my intuition was correct. The one of the last questions though on this subject is what are your what do you how do I want to say that? What are your thoughts about side effects, negative side effects from vaccines, and this narrative around a kind of active agency that's shielding or hiding these negative side effects from the general public?
well, what I think about that is that you have today. I think we have to trust the science, and some people can say, well, scientists can be bought off by the corporations. That's true. Uh, some scientists there's junk science out there. There's some science that's not very good. But at the end of the day, I think that who else are we going? I mean, we can either believe good science and good scientists that are being published in peer-reviewed journals by their peers, that disclose their commercial connections,
Mm-hmm.
how they're being paid, and then other scientists looking, and it's open forum. You can read their paper. You can get it on PubMed. PubMed.gov is the world's largest medical database. It's free to search. You can read the papers yourself. You can read the abstracts in the papers. It's open to anybody to read, and it's experimentation. It's hypothesis. It's the scientific method, which means that they have to get rigorous data. They have to do a rigorous experimentation. They have to have a lot they have to do it over and over and over again, and make sure that those results are solid. And then they have to publish them in front of their peers and in
Mm-hmm.
front of all of us. All of us have access to it. On the other hand, is somebody who says, "Oh, well, I heard and I read on the internet that thousands of people are dying of the vaccine, and that it's causing all these long-term negative effects." Okay, show me the papers, show me the science, show me the rigorous science, show me where it's published, and the methodology and the experimentation is freely available for anybody to look at. It's open source. Or is it just somebody that came up with that because that's their notion? They have a notion of that. That's their politics. That's their orientation. Is that there are people out there trying to kill people and make big profits in the process. Well, that's happening every day in the food industry, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There are people out there conspiring to okay, what's going to addict the most people? Sugar, fat, and salt combination that's going to addict the most people. And in the process, there's going to be collateral damage. We know that. I can demonstrate that 100 times over. So that's going on every day, and we don't talk about and complain about that. But when there's a vaccine, so what I'm saying is that we have to have something to hang our hat on as far as what's real and what isn't. I mean, that's a big topic today, isn't it?
Yes.
What's true and what's not true? What's truth and what's false truth? uh, you know, we have to look at that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with science because it's open source. It's people actually doing experiments where you make observations over and over again, and you say, why does this happen? And you do it. You make a hypothesis. It's happening because of this, and you run experiments to try to prove or disprove that over and over again. And then when you get results, you publish it to the wider community of scientists all over the world, and they start doing the same experiment over and over again to try to disprove it. That's science. You try to disprove it. Is that
which
is
is
that why
which
that's
is
happening?
which is great. And I what I think we tend to forget is we tend to look at science with a religious attitude and deify it, as opposed to recognize that science is a process,
It's a
and
process.
its process is trying to eradicate the tendency for unconscious bias and various motivations to affect outcomes of the studies. And so I get the system. I think it's powerful, but if I'm going to dive down into our
Yes, but the last thing I want to say is it perfect? No,
right,
it's
totally.
not perfect. It's humans. It's humans.
Yes.
We're not perfect, but it's the best that we have. That's my point. It's an open source. PubMed is free. It's the world's largest medical database. You can search, like, does Hawthorne really help the heart? You can go onto PubMed and see what research has been done on actual people. So it's the best that we have, and it's better than somebody's notion that gets passed on from
Yeah.
person to person with no, where's your evidence? There's no evidence.
So the thank you for that, by the way. That was nice to talk about, because this is one of those things that people don't talk about, or they just get angry or pissed off or confused or whatever. Just having an insightful conversation with it's not charged isn't common right
Right.
now on this subject.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle again. I don't have a charge on it.
Well, and there's a certain I think important practice of being in the middle, having a practice of being in the middle, because I have
But
parts of myself that are going to want to go to the extremes. And if I have a kind of desire to return to the middle, there's a tension in the opposites that gets connected with. So
exactly, the Tao, the
the
Tao,
down, yes,
the
yeah.
middle way, the middle way.
Well, I've enjoyed this. I told you before, the presentation of this book is amazing. By the way, do you have till I forget what? Do you have 30 more minutes?
Yeah.
Are you good? Okay, cool. Um, this book not only is gorgeous, but it's about one of my favorite subjects right now. Mushrooms are of incredible interest to me, so I've started reading a lot of books on mushrooms. Your book goes over medicinal mushrooms, so you talk about the overview of herbs and mushrooms, and I want to talk a little bit about that. But given that we've only got 30 minutes, I really want to dive into the visionary aspects of mushrooms. And could you set us up broadly about mushrooms in general as agents of healing, and then get into why visionary mushrooms or our entheogenic or psychedelic mushrooms are of such importance?
Yes. Well, in a nutshell, as far as overall mushrooms, why can they be transformative? Why can they contribute so much to our personal and planetary health? First of all, they're just so packed with nutrition. Again, they're the highest fiber food, so you're going to get a tremendous amount of fiber, which is really, really key to health for many reasons. And number two, they're loaded with trace minerals like iron and copper and zinc, and so they're an amazing source of minerals. They're a good source of B vitamins and other vitamins, even vitamin D. If they're exposed to sun, they can produce their own vitamin D. So we're eating
Mm.
shiitake, for instance, we can get some vitamin D from that. Uh, and they're also very high in high quality and usable, biologically usable protein. So it's a fantastic protein source. Some oyster mushrooms especially are very easy to digest, and they're up to 1/3 usable and protein with all the essential amino acids. So they're an amazing source of high quality protein. Uh, and some fatty acids, though they're low fat in general, low cholesterol. And then finally, they have these amazing cell wall polymers called glucans. They're beta glucans are the most discussed and studied, but beta glucans are basically glucose molecules that are attached end to end in a certain way so that we can't digest them in the upper GI tract. Starch is also a glucose polymer, a glucan, but they're put together in a way that we can cut those glucose molecules off and use the energy in our upper GI tract. But beta glucans are put together so that it's like insoluble fiber and soluble fiber in mushrooms, and they go down in our gut They're not broken down much. And when they get down there, then bacteria feed on that, and it encourages complexity and it encourages diversity. So, and it turns out that these beta glucans, that we have ancient receptors all along our upper gut, our which are called Peyer's patches. There are receptor sites there for fungi. All fungi have these beta glucans, 1316 beta glucan, and that, so as soon as our body um, detects these beta glucans, they're taken up in special areas called M cells. So they're taken up and then they're immediately gobbled up by macrophages, our big cell eaters at one of our immune cells, broken down and then activated and then sent out to other immune cells that activate those then. So there's this really amazing circuitry, if you will, in our body that detects those beta glucans from fungus because it's fungus. And so we over the millions of years of our evolution, we've had to detect fungus because they're potential pathogens. They're potential pathogens that could feed on us. So we've had to learn to detect them. And even nowadays, if we're eating shiitake, which is not at all pathogenic, very safe and very healthy to eat, it can still activate all of these immune processes, which lead to stronger and more resilient and also more active T cells, which are memory. They're memory cells. That's one thing that when we're infected with Omicron, for instance, we have antibodies which only last for say 6 months or a year, but we also have T cells, and there's a lot of research on T cells showing that our T helper cells and other T memory cells are activated when we're infected, and those last a long time. So we get long lasting, maybe up to years, maybe even a lifetime of a memory against these specific pathogens and viruses. So using mushrooms regularly can help keep our T cells and our innate immunity ready at the ready, and so it can help promote balance, and it can help promote strength, and can help promote vigilance against pathogens while we're using them regularly. And there is so much clinical research and in vivo and in vitro laboratory research on this all around the world that really has pointed out that beta glucans from fungi have all of these anti-inflammatory, immune regulating properties that are so beneficial to our health. And that's why they become such a popular dietary supplement now, because of immune regulation, immune strengthening properties that they have, and especially when used regularly. Now, there are two ways to, one more little minor point, or actually it's a very important point. There are two types of products out there that you'll find. You'll find whole mushrooms that are grown, and some of it is mycelium that's grown on different grains like brown rice. And there's also, then if you wait long enough, then they produce fruiting bodies, which are the actual mushroom. So there's a big discussion out there in the marketplace. Do you want fruiting body? Do you want mycelium? Do you want just an extract that takes the triterpenes and beta glucans out of the matrix of the mushroom and throws the rest of the mushroom away? Do you want that? But it concentrates the triterpenes and other compounds that we know have anti-inflammatory effects. What's the best product to get out there? My research and lab clinical experience shows me that it's really important to get the whole mushroom and to get a bag of powder. And if you get a bag of powder, say 8-ounce bag of powder, it's going to be about the same price as if you're taking an extract out of the mushroom and concentrating it and throwing the fiber away. You're getting so much more benefit out of the whole mushroom. And so that's one aspect. The mycelium isn't any better or worse than the mushroom fruiting bodies themselves, the mushrooms, but you want to make sure to get plenty of fungal biomass. And if you grow mycelium on grains like brown rice, and it's only allowed to culture in the brown rice for say a week or two, and then and then they harvest it and cook it and dry it and powder it and put it into capsules or a bag, that's not going to be much good because you're going to get so much starch from the brown rice. So you want to make sure to go with a company that is going to let them culture for a long time, let's say even up to a month and a half, 2 months, and they consume almost all of the brown rice and produce a lot of mycelium and then start producing fruiting bodies. That's the ideal circumstance. And I
Hmm.
point this out strongly in my book. I discuss that in detail. So, and then again, there's so many benefits to the mushrooms, but nutrition, fiber, protein, and the one big thing that I like to point out so strongly is that it's mushrooms are adding a lot of mushrooms to the diet, and a mushroom powder in your soups, stir fries, wherever is going to be such a good um, uh, step to greater health because it's a way of transitioning from an animal-based diet. That because you're getting a kind of a texture, like if you cook lion's mane and slice it and
Right.
kind of grill it, it kind of has a texture like meat,
Yeah, it
and it
does.
has a lot of the same shiitake, lion's mane, oyster mushrooms. They have a lot of the same properties as meat, high protein, except the fat, and except that animal products have zero fiber, whereas mushrooms are the highest fiber food. So it's a great way to transition to a whole foods plant-based diet and still get many of the benefits of the meat and also gain many of the benefits from a plant-based diet.
So the things that really blow my mind about mushrooms are that I've learned recently is how ubiquitous spores are, and mycelium is everywhere. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's every like that blows my mind. And then the second thing is the neurogenerative piece that there's you're like I guess it just if people knew this. One of my favorite documentaries in the world is Fantastic Fungi, and it blew my mind when that came out, and I wish more people watched it. But
Right, it's good.
those aspects of mushrooms are pretty magical, like all of them. Mushrooms seem to be magical. Then there's this subjective, experiential aspect of psilocybin that it has been called magic. And
Magic
you
mushrooms.
you offer a solid amount of research. I could read it. I'll include the links at the bottom, but we're talking about studies that involve psilocybin yield reductions in depression symptoms, reduction in addiction, reduction in anxiety, reduction in post-traumatic stress symptoms.
Yeah.
They involve greater senses of satisfaction, less anxiety about death, people being able to attend to tasks in their life that they hadn't realized existed before or develop the courage to do so. We're talking about radical shifts by taking a mushroom. So,
That's right.
from your biologists and your biological and meditative mind, what is up with that?
Well, they've been used for a long time. We know that. I go through the history a little bit in my book, but
Yeah.
it was known in the 1500s by the Spaniards that came over to South America that the indigenous people there were using magical mushrooms or visionary mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms, for ritual, for healing, spiritual healing, of course, and for other purposes, just for pleasure. Even I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure they were using them just for sheer pleasure to create a happy mood. And so now, in the 1950s, that was that was brought to the wider world's attention through the work of Gordon Wasson and a few other people, certainly Hoffman,
Mm-hmm.
certainly Albert Hoffman. So Albert, I would say Albert Hoffman, and was very instrumental because he was the first one to isolate the alkaloids, the active alkaloids, and bring it down to Maria Sabina, where they all ate it together. Hoffman and another person, they all ate the tablets of pure psilocybin, and he asked Maria Sabina, "Is this what you're feeling when you eat the mushrooms?" And she said, "No, I don't feel anything." So then they ate another round of tablets, And all of a sudden it started to come on, and she said, yes, yes, it's very powerful. This is what I feel. And it's because the psilocybin wasn't nearly as quickly absorbed in the purified form than in the mushroom. It was much faster absorbed in the mushroom. So they took a double dose, and then they really got the trip of their lives. But this is when it first came to our attention. Oh, that's another story. That's a long story. But so it's been around, and other visionary, certainly herbs have been used for even longer than mushrooms, but probably mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms have been used for about maybe a couple thousand years. We don't know, or longer even. Certainly, it would get your attention if you ate a few psilocybin mushrooms. It's going to get your attention, and there's no doubt about what you're feeling. But now, and then in the 1950s, so it started to spread, the word started to spread, and then many scientists started to get onto it and become interested in it. And throughout the 60s and early 70s, there was a lot of research being conducted on LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, many small clinical trials, clinical reports showing the benefits. And then in the late 70s, all the research licenses were pulled, and it was shut down. Partly, Michael Pollan makes the point that it was Timothy Leary, just
Yeah, the
whipping everybody up into tune in and drop out.
Static frenzy.
Yeah, so it just got out of hand, and when we weren't ready for it, people didn't know what to make of it or how to use it, and we had no, unlike a tradition like in South America where the use of them were handed on from generation to generation. We had nothing. All of a sudden, they just hit the scene, and people were downing LSD and psychedelic mushrooms with no training, no knowledge about what they might find in there, which is, a Pandora's box, as we well know. All that early childhood trauma is down there, and suddenly you're looking at it face to face, and of course, there's going to be a lot of pushback from the authorities too, because people seem to be out of control in a way. But then, people used it underground. There were lots of facilitators. We could call them guides or facilitators. There were a lot of people working underground all the way from the 1970s. Many psychologists and psychiatrists using them even, basically underground, behind the scenes, for what, 20, 30 years. And then now it's all out in the open. It's all coming out in the open. And the unfortunate part of it is the same as cannabis, is that now it's a financial gold rush.
Right.
So many companies are wanting to cash in on it. You're always going to find that in human nature. But on the other side, there are so many people now microdosing and taking macro doses and really opening up. And now with more preparation, we have more understanding about inner psychology. Gabor Mate has been out there since the 80s doing his work. And there's so many counselors, and now counseling is much more widespread, I'd say. Going to counselors and realizing that getting counseling and finding counseling can be helpful, has really come out of the closet now and is out. And most cities, there are many counselors available, and psychiatrists and psychologists are available, and psychotherapists, and they're being supported there. And now psychedelic mushrooms have come into the picture because of so much depression, anxiety, and other modern angst out there. As we know, it's widespread. The numbers of how many people are depressed or anxious are astronomical, and the amount of prescriptions that are being written for SSRIs and benzos are also astronomical. And just the general dissatisfaction with the results that people are getting with benzos, benzodiazepines, and SSRIs, and also when you really look into the studies behind the treatment efficacy and safety for benzodiazepines and SSRIs, we're finding that there is publication bias, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to push SSRIs when in fact the utility of them is minimal. Oftentimes you have to keep switching around. They have major side effects such as shutting down the libido.
Yeah.
I've seen side effects like stops saliva from flowing, and people get a lot of tooth decay. And I mean, there are many side effects of these things. Also, it kind of shuts you down emotionally and sedates you in many ways so that you can't feel joy. You don't feel anxious, but you can't feel joy either. Maybe you just don't feel your mood swings have been damped down. In other words, alcohol does exactly the same thing. It just basically shuts us down emotionally with chronic use. But now psilocybin comes on the scene, and I think more and more people are interested in going inside, but they don't know how to go about it, and they don't, and also it seems daunting to have to do a 10-year meditation program to get down in there and get in touch with that trauma and to open it up. And it's meditation is essential along with, in my opinion, along with psilocybin and hallucinogenic therapy. It's essential to also follow the sessions up with meditation because. And so what I've learned, I'll cut to the chase, with so many decades myself of using psilocybin, is that they are amazing agents of transformation, and I see very few downsides of personally of psilocybin use. I see very few downsides. Yes, people that are already have major psychological problems, even psychosis, and really strong problems going on in their life. You must. I strongly recommend that you go for a facilitator. Unfortunately, it's and personally, I have a practice online now, but in my practice, I have so many people saying, "How can I get psilocybin? How can I find a guide or a facilitator?" And there just aren't enough to go around now.
Right.
And of course, there are many training programs going on, but the training programs still can only train the California School of Integral Studies. I mean, their process, their program is very popular and very good, but it's very expensive, and they can only train so many people at once. So the need is very great right now for facilitators and for growers and figuring out the legality of growing and actually having products out there. I mean, I wish I could just grow openly, and as I give it away, I like giving it away to people because as a microdose, not as a macrodose. So I'm more cautious about that. But again, I really strongly recommend that you work with a facilitator if you do have depression, anxiety, other psychological issues going on. I highly recommend using a facilitator and trying to find one. Unfortunately, again, there isn't enough to go around. But so my bottom line is they're amazing agents for change, and they can really put you in touch because they dissolve the default mode network, our sense of ego, our sense of self, which basically, and again, and this is Gabor Mate speaking, but it's amazing to think that our ego is basically constructed from an early age to protect ourselves against the world. And when you think of the ego in that fashion, it protects us. It allows us to move ahead with our life and protect us from all this input that's coming in everywhere, negative and positive. So it may be necessary, but when you look at it in that light, it all excuse me, it also filters out a lot of things and suppresses a lot of things that don't allow us to reach our full potential and our full joy in life, and just break out into our creative potential and joy in life. It holds us back tremendously. And so a psilocybin session or a series of sessions along with, it's very important to have follow-up, to have integration. is very important. That's the most important part of the session, is really making sense of what we feel when we take a major psilocybin journey, which might be 3 grams, it might be 4 or 5 grams of dried mushroom, or even up to 5 grams for some people. Uh, and a heroic dose might even be higher than that, but I don't recommend that unless you really know what you're doing and you have experience and you're under a guide.
Hmm.
And ayahuasca
Absolutely.
falls in this same camp. In my little community here, there's an ayahuasquero available in my little community up here in the Sierra foothills. So that's also getting to be quite open, and I think it's actually maybe more widely available and out there because it's not quite so stigmatized maybe as LSD or
Well, I'm aware
psilocybin.
of our time, and I want to be able to close the loop on a couple of these.
Well,
Uh,
microdosing we should talk about.
well, and primarily, what are your recommendations? Because I know a lot of people are out there saying, "What do I need to know?" Many people are still scared because of the effort that was, launched in order to,
Suppress it.
yeah, totally suppress it. That's a direct way of saying it. Yes. So, will you leave us with some of those thoughts? I want to know. I'm curious about what are your recommendations for people, and also the one thing back from COVID is that for people that get COVID, so to speak, what are your treatment recommendations for from an herbal perspective? If you could get to those two things before we finish.
Right. Well, to continue on with psilocybin, I recommend, by yourself, if you don't have the benefit of having a trained facilitator, then I recommend starting with microdosing, and that's the easiest way to start. And microdosing, basically, if you can get dried mushrooms are always the way to go over powder or over a liquid tincture or extract. Yes, a liquid tincture or extract can be okay, or powders. But as soon as you powder the mushroom, as soon as you make a liquid extract like a tincture, it is going to make the alkaloids less stable. And
Mm.
the alkaloids are not very stable. So keep the mushroom in its whole form is the best. Keep the whole mushroom in its whole form, and only powder it if you're going to take it. But even better than that is just take a piece of the cap and weigh it. Get a jeweler scale and weigh out the dose. The best dose to start out with is about 300 to 500 milligrams is the best dose to start with, in my opinion. So just get a jeweler scale, take a piece of the cap or stem. The stem's a little more potent than the cap. Put that onto the scale and weigh it, and just start with 3 to 500 milligrams. It doesn't really matter if it's around a meal time or not. They're pretty impervious to that. It takes longer for it to come on if you take it after eating than if you take it on an empty stomach. It comes on a lot faster. The way to do it is to take the dried, and by the way, I'm not recommending that you do it. I'm going to have a disclosure here.
Yes.
What I'm saying, I'm just giving you information about how best to do it if you were to choose that. But I'm not pushing it or recommending it in any way. I'm just giving you my experience. So what I would do is take a piece of the cap and weigh it. Say, start if you're a big person, start with 500 milligrams. Take that piece and put it in your mouth and resalt and kind of rehydrate it with your saliva. Keep it in there and just kind of move it around your mouth and let it soak up the saliva and get soft. And once it's soft, then you can kind of break it up with your teeth a bit and then swallow it. And that's really the fastest way. It should take about 20 minutes to a half an hour before you start feeling it. A liquid's going to be a little bit faster. That's another story, but I still recommend just the whole mushroom because you know what you're getting at that point. A white powder you don't, or a capsule or a powder, you don't know what you're getting. So it's better to
Hmm.
use the whole mushroom. And then if you go up from there in a microdose, you can go up to 6, 7, 8, 900 milligrams, even a gram. A gram is called a museum dose, meaning that you can take a gram of the mushroom and you can still function. You can still go to the museum or a concert and you can really enjoy it, really connect, really get out of your head, and really just have a whole experience of the music inside your body and the joy of it. and you can still deal with normal reality. Be careful about driving though. If you've taken a gram,
Mm-hmm.
it can be somewhat disorienting, and you can feel dizzy and a little disoriented if you're taking a gram. Now, once you go up above that to a gram and a half, 2 grams, 3 grams, then you're better off. That's really important. Set and setting is talked about over and over again. The set meaning your mindset when you take it, better to be taking it on with a good mindset rather than, and gratitude rather than, oh God, I'm feeling so terrible. I wonder if this is going to help me. You're better off meditating or getting to a place where you're feeling pretty good before taking a major journey. That's my recommendation. Don't use it for trying to heal depression or something like that. Work with a psychotherapist and then, or a guide, and then get to a place where you're feeling really positive about the experience. That's the set. And then the setting, I always like going out in the woods personally and being in nature, not around a lot of people. I mean, you can take 500 milligrams and go to a concert and be around a lot of people. But when you get up into the 2 or 3, 4 gram dose, you're really better off being away from people and being with a
Mm-hmm.
close friend that's holding space for you. Or and so if you can't find a guide or a facilitator, get a close friend that you feel really comfortable with to hold space for you when you're taking 2 or 3 or 4 grams. That's going to be a major journey, and it's going to really, it could very well be that it's going to challenge you. It could be challenging. You could have fear coming up. You could have panic even coming up in the very higher doses. Probably not with a gram or below. And early things could come up. You could be in touch with them, and it can be difficult to deal with. But it's the difficulty that really is the transformative part. So I encourage a person, if they are taking a higher dose, to really know that is an important part of the journey, the difficulty and dealing and facing these issues, early trauma, the anger with your parent or whatever it is, facing that and going into it. That's what psilocybin does. It opens everything up and it allows you to get in touch with it. And it can also, with the higher doses, you can have a spiritual experience where you feel connected to everything that is. You don't feel like this tiny little bag of inside your skin anymore. Me. It really opens you up to a much greater consciousness, and you feel a part of everything. You feel a part of all that is, and it's just such an incredible spiritual feeling that some people in these clinical trials say that this is the most profound spiritual experience I've ever had in my entire life. And it
Mm-hmm.
lasts. The feeling of awe and the feeling of being connected to something greater than our puny ego can be really life changing and really shifting in our consciousness. And it lasts. It has shown that it can last for a year or 2 years. Just even 1 or 2 sessions can last. So it's very profound. It's very transformative. It's incredible. But now my caveat, it's not going to heal in and of itself. You could take a dozen sessions or 100 sessions, and still you're not going to get to the place where you feel completely uh, beautiful inside your skin, and you feel you have a very calm, equanimous feeling most of the time. Your mind is not bothering you. You feel very relaxed and very wonderful inside your body and connected to other people and with no worry and no concerns. That's a place that takes work to get to, but this
Right.
can open everything. It can open the avenue up for you to take your journey on discovery and to get to that place of feeling really equanimous most of the time. Uh, and so that's why, again, when you have the experience, it's very important to integrate that into your life. So integration is so important. And then practice, practice what you've learned and the insights that you have. And meditation is the best way to do that, to sit with that insight that you got that was so profound that I'm part of something much greater. That's
Mm-hmm.
something to sit with and really ponder and slow down and sit with that, and then work with a guide, work with a psychotherapist to really help integrate those powerful insights into your life that can be so transformative. And then back to microdosing, I think
Well, I've got
microdosing.
Chris. I've got to interrupt. I'm sorry because I literally have a patient in about
Oh, okay, sorry.
45 seconds. I would love to go off on that, but would you mind emailing me a treatment protocol? This gets dicey, but what you'd recommend for somebody? I want that COVID question about how we treat it. I'm
Right.
curious what kind of herbs are valuable for that process. So if you email that to me, but I do need to go, unfortunately, because I get the
Well, I can show you. I can send you a link to my PowerPoint presentation and talk that goes over everything about what you're
That's perfect.
asking about.
There will be a link below for those that are watching or listening. Click below on this link, and I'll take you to Chris's website. By the way, his website is full of wonderful things to check out. Check it out at ChristopherHobbs.com. And I'll have links below.
Okay.
But Chris, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, we had a wine-ranging talk. That's for
Holy
sure.
moly,
No
I
holds
know.
barred, right?
I'm grateful, man. Thank you, and
Okay.
I'll follow up with you soon. But I'm eager to go back through and edit this, and get it out.
Okay, great. Thanks, John.
Thank you.